Alright everyone, Double Master 2022 spoilers are now finally over, and it's time to finally get a review of the most likely Pauper cards in this new set. Or at least those cards are new only for us who plays Pauper, because this set is only full of reprints. There's nothing new in Magic at least. But Pauper, since it's the only common format, is the only format able to get new staples through the downgrades. So I'm not reviewing a top 8, more like get a view of the cards that I like the most, and I think that can eventually be playable in Pauper. Oh well, first is Militia Bugler, which is, I think, that is pretty strong. I mean, this card can be fit in at least 3 different kinds of decks. The first one are normal style creatures deck in form of, in example, White Winnie. In a similar way, of Slivers plays cards like Lead Stampede or Winnie Way. So it's just a sort of carded vintage plus selection spell. Then we can also fit in carded vintage strategies. I'm thinking about two way of play white decks. The first one are Boros decks in form of Boros Metalcraft or any other way to play Boros, but Boros, not Boros Bully or Boros Token. Probably you don't really need Militia Bugler in Boros Bully. Okay, it's cool at all to be able to fetch for a Squadron Oak or a Seeker of the Way, but besides being able to fetch Squadron Oak, I think that the card is not really strong. In Boros Metalcraft is probably much better, but I'm not sure if this card is better compared to the artifact card advantage, in example Spare Supplies or the most iconic experimental synthesizer. And the reason is pretty simple. Boros Monarch or Boros Metalcraft doesn't run a lot of creatures, and Militia Bugler is not Imperial Recruit because it's able to see only the first 4 cards of the deck. For that reason, I think that it's probably better to not play Militia Bugler in any Boros deck. But we're still early on the Double Master 2022 season, so I think you can try it, but probably not in 4 copies or just you just want to play only 1 or 2 copies, because the card can be kind of cool sometimes, but not most times. And since Boros Metalcraft is running Korsky Fisher, I think the most important part of Militia Bugler in that deck is being able to play Militia Bugler and then blink it on or play it again, and which means that the card can be easily pretty abused with Ephemerate or Ninja of TT powers, and that's the reason why I think that you may want to try it in Azorius Ephemerate or in Azorius Familiars, which are 2 control decks with a lot of powerful ETB effects, and in Familiars seems better compared to other decks, since you can find your second copy of Soundscape Familiar to combo off with Archmancer, or you can find Sage of Denizen or Good Sphere Spittle to get your infinite combo with Ghost of Liquor by getting infinite life or milling your opponent, but probably doesn't do much in Familiars, because also Familiars doesn't run a lot of creatures, so maybe it's just a one-off in that deck. And finally, I was thinking of Azorius Fairies, which is a deck that Snapbot Games already played, and you can find on his YouTube channel. And in that shell, probably Militia Bugler is very powerful, because That deck was running a lot of creatures, and you can fetch all the creatures of that deck, and you can also fetch a Ninja of TT Power or a Moon Circuit Hacker, and then a Ninja to the Militia Bugler and play again Militia Bugler. So basically you are getting the same interaction as Bugler Flawless, but in certain ways it's more powerful since it takes one more card, and it also able to found another Ninja of DT powers or similar effect. And I think that those may be the best decks to play Militia Bugler. Jeskai Elder is probably pretty weak, but I think that if Jeskai or Izzet or more likely an Izzet prowess deck and an Izzet aggressive deck, maybe born from the Double Masters, Jeskai Elder can fit it pretty easily. It's not strong, the card, but since it has prowess, it's probably good. Also, being able to loot one card when it deals damage is better than nothing. I think it's important to note that an Izzet prowess deck can also run stuff like Needle Drop or other flashback cards, and by looting a card with flashback you basically not discarding anything. Whatever, Jeskai Elder is kind of similar to another prowess card that you probably already know, and you probably already have been able to see in the previous day's spoiler, which is Monastery Whisper. And Monastery Whisper is the main reason why I think that probably we will see an Izzet prowess deck in the format. Then we have Carrier Troll. I think that the card is not really great, but at least is a kind of good enabler for Aristocrat strategies. You may want to play it something like Mono Black Aristocrats, since it costs 2 mana, but it generates another token when you kill it, and also the creature still has some good stats since it's a 2/1 for 2 mana. Anyway, I think that the card is not really great in constructed format, so probably will not be able to get any play at all. Linear's Elite is a card that I think is pretty cool, but I also think that is not really fit for the current metagame. But because we have more powerful creatures relying on the graveyard, in example Gangler, but also because decks like Golgari Delve, which is the deck that I think that may play Linear's Elite, aren't really great, and also there are a lot of graveyard 8 in form of, in example, Nihil Spellbomb or Relic of Progenitus. Linear's Elite or Golgari Delve. Golgari Delve was a deck that was born when thanks to Khans of Tarkir, because thanks to Khans of Tarkir they printed Routing Mandrills, Gangler, and was kind of a tier 2 deck. But you know, basically if you want to play something that draw a lot of cards and play a lot of big creatures, probably you just can play Dimir, Delve or Affinity. Vampire Sovereign is kind of flying Grey Merchant of Asphodel. I think the card is pretty weak, but having flying probably makes it enough for the card to be compared to Grey Merchant of Asphodel or Bleakoven Vampire. Whenever I think that Merchant and Bleakoven Vampire are way better, because they can get you more life, can deal more damage, and can be more aggressive. So basically, Bleakoven Vampire is good because it can deal a lot of damage. Grey Merchant of Asphodel is good because you can deal or get more than 4 lives for damage. Vampire Sovereign deals only 3 damage, back only 3 lives, but it has flying. So basically is a kind of worse Merchant of Asphodel, but at least it can block Spellstutter Sprite or Korsky Fisher. Okay, so you are trying to play in mono black, worse version of Merchant just to be able to block Korsky Fisher. Well, I think that doesn't really make the card good, but some people wanted to talk about it, so I think that it's fine to bring it in this video. Coil then is a card that I think that you may think that is not really great, but in my opinion, in this format, in this metagame, Coil can be not relevant, but still pretty great. There's a lot of graveyard recursion, and there's a lot of broken stuff that can die from Coil, so being able to exile a Murmforcer or a Narcomancer against Affinity or against Jeskai Ephemerate could be good enough. So Affinity plays Blood Fountain and doesn't really have a lot of creatures, and Jeskai plays Late to Dinner, so by being able to both kill their creature and exile it, you are just generating virtual card advantages by preventing them to reanimating their creature, and that's the great part about Coil. Probably is way worse compared to Relic of Progenitus if you just want to block their graveyard recursion, but if you're playing something like a control or mid-range style deck with creature removals, Coil is a great addition for the main deck. Monastery Whisper. Well, I think that there's no need to explanation here. Card was a banger in Modern and in Pioneer and also in Standard, and I think it will be also great in Pauper. It's truly rare to see a 1 mana prowess creature in Pauper at common level rarity. Also, it has aced. Okay, why did you think that this card can be common? There's no reason to print it at common. It was already broken at uncommon. Oh, whatever. I think that this card can easily fit in at least something like 10 or more decks. I mean, Mono Black, Mono Redborn, Mono Red Heroic, Rakdosborn, Izzet Prowess, Izzet Delver without an Ninja and Fairies if you just want to be aggressive in a sort of traditional style tempo deck. Then you can also play it in something like Rakdos Shadow. There's no Shadow, but you can play something like Gurmagangler, Killfiend, and Monastery Whisper. And you can also play it in Mono Red Blitz, and if you aren't playing Killfiend and Festival Crusher, you can just play Mono Red Heroic. You can also play Boros Heroic with Monastery Whisper. So many decks that can play Monastery Whisper, and probably the card will not change the format, but it will impact the format a lot, or just provide a powerful 1 mana creature for red aggressive decks. The best thing that could happen eventually will be have better aggressive strategies in Pauper, meaning that those powerful card advantage deck will change to have enough answers against those decks. Maybe not the main deck, but at least in the sideboard, and having more powerful decks at the beatdown strategy will be even better for the format, hypothetically at least, because with more kind of strategies you are also forced to play more interactive spells, and having more interactive games just means that you are playing a better format, I think. Then there's Experiment 1, and Experiment 1 is another great 1 mana creature for aggressive strategies, but probably not in Pauper, because Green business decks usually are green aggro decks usually are Buggles and Stompy, and Experiment 1 doesn't really fit the Pauper Stompy. And you don't want to play Experiment 1 in Buggles. In Stompy probably can be playable, but not as good as the modern Stompy, since you don't have big creature that costs 2 or 3 mana, and you are forced to play a lower curve and just trying to play a game plan similar to Redequins or to Buggles, just by dropping a couple or more creatures in the first 2 turns, and then by equipping your creatures with Elfen Guide, Rancor, Vines of Vastwood, etc. Anyway, Experiment 1 is great as a card, and maybe is also great with Inger of the Old Pact, so maybe it will not be great in Mono Green Stompy, but maybe you may want to try something like green white aggressive strategy with relying on +1/+1 counter. That will be cool, but I'm not sure how much creatures or spells do we really have to play something like this. Bloodwater Entity isn't really great in construct probably, but in my opinion, having a prowess threat with a kind of reliable ETB effect can make this card better than nothing. It also has flying. The worst part about this card is actually that we already have Nivix Cyclops, but you may put on the top of your deck something like a protection spell or Temur Battle Rage, or just another cantrip, and that makes Bloodwater Entity something like a good mid-game creature for an instant prowess deck, but I'm not sure yet. If I'll play in the next weeks something like instant prowess, I'll try both Nidvix, Cyclops and Bloodwater Entity, because they kind of slot in the same top of the curve, since I'm not expecting instant prowess to play more than 4 copies of a 3 mana creature, and Nivix Cyclops can kill your opponent way faster compared to Bloodwater Entity, especially when you are also playing 4 copies of Temur Battle Rage. Caster Aristocrats. Well, when I was seeing card of Aristocrat downgraded at common, I was like, wow, I wasn't really expecting this card, because it's a payoff for or an enabler for Aristocrats strategies, and also it's an enabler that can protect itself by sacrificing cards that you already have on the battlefield, basically, because you are playing a deck that is entirely built on sacrifice and stuff. So basically it's kind of similar to Etug in how it does the thing that it does, but of course is way worse compared to Etug, because Etug can sacrifice non-creature permanent. And the worst part about Carta Aristocrats, when it comes to where do you want to play it, is that Aristocrats doesn't really have something like Blood Artist. Yes, we have a 4 mana Blood Artist, but we are playing a deck that tries to have a lower mana curve compared to other aggressive strategies, and rely to creatures that does stuff when you sacrifice them. So it's probably worse, too much worse compared to Blood Artist, the 4 mana one that does the same exact thing, and is probably also worse compared to Carrion Feeder, since the Aristocrats in Pauper is more like an aggro deck instead of a combo style deck, And that's the reason why I think that the character Aristocrats, it may not see play at all, but I'm still a huge fan of this card because the first deck I played in Pauper was Hordes of Aristocrats, and being able to have another powerful card in Hordes of Aristocrats just hypes me. So I truly want to try character Aristocrats in something. And still, we're still talking about Aristocrats, since in Double Master Draft, the Aristocrats archetype is Mardu, as the Mardu colors, and we have Firebolt Artist, which is another good downgrade for the Double Masters Limited, but probably is not good enough for Pauper. Okay, it can sacrifice a creature each turn, it has haste, it costs only 2 mana for a 2/2 haste body, and it also deals damage to your opponent when you sacrifice a creature, and you are not forced to sacrifice the creature because you chose to sacrifice the creature, but still, it doesn't really do a lot of stuff, or rather, it does a lot of stuff, but it doesn't do this stuff in a good enough way. I mean, haste is great, costing only 2 mana is great, the body is kind of good for the converted mana cost, but it deals only 2 damage and only to your opponent, and you sacrifice only on your upkeep, so it's not an activated ability, and it triggers only when you sacrifice the creature for that ability, and not whenever you sacrifice a creature during your turn, during your opponent's turn, or whatever. So for that reason, I think that the card is kind of not playable, but still a pretty cool design at least. For Izzet's Charm, so Izzet's Charm is good indeed, but we want to play it. I think not, because it doesn't do too much. Well, yeah, it does a lot of things, and it does in a pretty good way, because being able to have a counter that can also be a removal spell, and if you don't need to do the dot stuff previously, you can just discard it to draw to new cards, and it's great, but we don't really have something like the flying bird, the flying phoenix that is legal on Pioneer. I don't remember the name. That the phoenix that if you play the 3 or more instant or sorcery spell, it reanimates itself without paying any mana. So Izzet's Charm doesn't seem playable in Pauper if you don't consider at least its control with Serpentine Curve, because in Serpentine Curve control you can just dig trying to find Fling or Serpentine Curve, and even if you discard instant or sorcery spells, you are just making a bigger snake, so it can accelerate your gameplay in Izzet Curve, which is pretty solid, and is also a counter to counter an opponent counter or removal spells, and if you are against fairies or whatever deck relying on creatures, you can also kill their creatures. So at least in Izzet Curve, this card will be surely playable. In other decks, well, I'm not really sure. Maybe in its prowess, because it does a lot of stuff and it costs only 2 mana. You can also protect your creature from a removal spells. You can kill one blocker, or you can just dig for more creatures, or just dig for Timberbuff Rage. But probably I don't want to play it in Jeskai or in Fairies. But still is pretty cool as a card. And finally we have 10th Street Legionary. Okay, so we have another payoff for Boros Roik, but do we really have Boros Roik in Pauper? Not yet. Okay, we don't really have the mana base that exists in Pioneer or any other formats that is relying on rare or uncommon cards. But if you want to play heroic and you don't want to play more red or more white, well, now we have enough creatures. Because we have Monastery Whisper, so we can play something like 12 1 mana creatures, the 8 red 1 mana creatures, and also Lagona Trailblazer. Then we have Seeker of the Way, 10th District Legionnaire, and Akron Skyguard as 2 mana top decker. Well, maybe you don't really need to play Seeker of the Way and just play the 2 mana heroic creatures, and that will be means that probably you aren't playing 16 creature, or you don't want to play 16 creature, or maybe you want to play 20 creatures, not sure, but whatever. This card is just great because it costs 2 mana for a 2/2 haste creature, and you can put extra +1/+1 counter on it thanks to heroic, and you are also scrying 1 whenever you target it. So wow, so the card is pretty good. There's no way this card isn't playable. It was played at least in Pioneer Boros Heroic, but in Pauper, will we really able to have a way to tap 2 mana to cast 10 District Legionary, and then the next turn, probably turn 3 or turn 4, will be able to pump it, to enchant it, or to cast a Tremor Battle Rage just to make enough damage, because probably Pauper will see more aggressive decks compared to Omnipotetic Boros Heroic, only thanks to the tapped mana base in Pauper. Okay, so we talked about everything, and guys, thank you for watching this video. I'll see you next week with the usual uploads from Twitch, and we will also see on Twitch. This expansion will be legal, I think, starting in 2 weeks, because next the expansion will be released on 8th July, so I'm not sure if the expansion will be available on Magic Online earlier, but whatever, I'm just excited to play new stuff in Pauper. Also, thanks to Commander Legend, Baldur's Gate not being available on Magic Online.